All right. So today, class, I have Samara Bolling here. Uh, Thanks again, Samara, for coming to let me interview you. Just to give a brief introduction here about Samara, and she can touch on some of these things again if she would like. Many of you may be familiar with Intara, which is an agency here in Johnson City, and she'll talk about a lot of the work that they do. But she's the VP of Strategy and User Experience, and has been for a few years now, I think. And then before that, she was the director of integrated marketing and insights. Prior to that, she worked at Eastman as a marketing rep, and she's also worked in other roles in sort of across sectors and industries. She did PR. She's worked as a reporter early on in her career in Hamilton County down near Chattanooga area. I know Samara first from, she and I were enrolled in the same program at ETSU in the master's program back when it was professional communication. It's been over 10 years ago, I guess now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Samara's also active. She does, at one time, she was a executive board member of AAF Tri-Cities, and also she was a founding member of YP Tri, which I think is still going strong, and they do have a bunch of events in and around Johnson City and the Tri-Cities for young professionals. So, Samara, if you want to add anything to that, or if I left anything out, feel free. But other than that, I really kind of just want to jump in and ask you what you do at Intara now, and sort of a general overview of your position.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job summarizing. It's crazy to think back through all of those things as you're reading them, but yeah, that's a good summary of my background. At Antara today, as you mentioned, I lead the strategy and UX department. So we are a small but mighty team. We manage everything from customer research, so customer segmentation, primary research of just really surveying. We do surveys, we do focus groups, we do interviews, we do a lot of third-party research also, where we're looking at Forrester and Gartner reports and competitive analysis, all of that kind of stuff, just to really help inform our clients so they can build the best strategies possible. And then we also are in charge of UX. So everything from the information architecture, what pages are going to exist on a site? How should they be structured? What should live on each page? How should they link to each other? And then the content on a page, and all of the design. We're really data driven, as indicated by the research. So it's a nice marriage between research and UX. I think that we are actually conducting that research in-house, and then we can apply it to the websites that we build. In addition to that, we do some consulting around SEO, a little bit of SEM, but not really, more SEO. I'm really focused on the optimization of the site, and then we consult on kind of getting traffic to the site. And then in addition to all of that we do for our clients, my team and I are also the owners of the Antara brand and our Antara marketing and lead gen efforts for the agency. That includes positioning, the same types of research we do for our clients, and then of course, all of the lead generation and outbound and inbound marketing tactics that our clients execute for themselves, we execute for ourselves too. So that's really busy right now.
Yeah, lots going on. I mean, I was looking at your all's website again before this, and I mean, it's just grown a lot. I mean, the last few years, and as far as I know about Antara, being from this area, it's a pretty big agency relative to this area. I mean, there's quite a few. How many full-time employees do you all have?
I think we're right at 40. I know
Yeah.
we just had a couple new hires. I think that puts us right back up to like 38, 39, somewhere in there.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so just to give a little bit of insight, because I think a lot of our students we talk about these things in class, but just to sort of crystallize what Intara does, and Samara can build on this, they work mostly with clients to design websites. A lot of it are e-commerce websites. It's probably not all their work, but a big portion of is e-commerce. So they work with companies that do their own business-to-business and B2C marketing. But also, too, she mentioned they also have their own Intara brand, where they're pitching Intara as a product service to other brands, and so that is kind of the area that I'd like to. We can talk about all aspects of it, but for this week, generally, as in the readings, we are focusing on business to business marketing, and so Samara, just to give you a little bit of context. Most of the class, this is a media management graduate class. Most of the time we spend talking about business to consumer. It's just really difficult in 15 weeks to kind of dedicate a whole bunch to business, but it's a hugely important part of industry that I think students aren't really aware of. And they think of marketing and advertising, they think very much from the perspective of a consumer, right? As people who buy things, serve products and services, but they kind of forget about this whole other thing that goes into marketing. And Intar is kind of a perfect example that does a ton of business to business marketing. So could you talk a little bit about that work specifically and how it might be different from B2C?
Absolutely. I think one important thing for us, as far as nomenclature goes, when we're talking about our B2B clients, we call them clients. And then so their customer, we call the customer. So that just internally, just out of the gate, that helps us differentiate. Are we talking about an end customer, or are we talking about a client, which is kind of in the middle of the value chain, right? We primarily, our marketing is around trying to do business with manufacturers. So companies who create durable goods and sell through downstream channels. So that could be their own e-commerce website, that could be Amazon, it could be any marketplace. Like, you know, Amazon is a marketplace, but each industry also has its own kind of Amazon for that industry too. So like Granger, for example, is a specific type of marketplace. So when we think about B2B marketing, another thing we always like to say is B2B or B2C, they're all people at the end of it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, that even if you're selling business to business, you still have people on the other side that are going to be the decision makers, the procurement people, et cetera.
It's not just a thing out there, just business.
Right.
It's abstract, right?
Right. It's not that nebulous. But each industry is unique, each company is unique. And that's why it's, for us, it's a huge selling point for research, right? Because it's while it's easy to put yourself in the position of like a consumer, because you are a consumer, it's much more, it can be much trickier to put yourself in the position of a target audience on a B2B level. So with research, we can actually collect data, typically statistically significant data, that is representative of these predictable behaviors of the segments. So for example, with one manufacturer, we might survey their customers and learn, okay, well, depending on how frequently they order from you, they have this certain set of behaviors. So we would create unique strategies to each one of those segments to make sure that we're answering all of their needs. Another manufacturer might vary, their customer segments might vary based on the size of their order, or you know, where they're located. It's never really the same from one manufacturer to another. So that's why we really lead with research. One reason we lead with research is it's critical to understand what are the purchasing patterns of your customer. So if I'm a manufacturer of shoes and I'm selling to retailers, I need to understand how every one of my retailers wants to receive information, how they want to be marketed to, et cetera. So another thing with B2B marketing is, I mentioned that phrase value chain. You really have to understand the purchasing patterns within each of those customers. So for example, if I'm a retailer of shoes, or if I'm a manufacturer of shoes, retailer A may have, their CIO may make decisions, where at another retailer, their CMO may make the decision on what agency, you know, or how they purchase, et cetera. So we push research because it's the only way to really understand who you're selling to, what their preferences are, and how to move the needle, so to speak, to get them to buy what you need them to buy. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts on B2B. It's just,
Right.
it's the same kind of principles for B2C. It's just more complex because you're not typically, as a marketer, you don't typically understand what it's like to be a purchaser at a B2B company.
Right.
You can understand consumerism, but you don't understand the ins and outs of it.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of on the. It's a little bit less visible than because we don't function on the database as a business as a consumer does. But one thing I'm curious is, unfortunately, in this class, just the nature of it again, and maybe I'll try to build this in future semesters, is we don't have time really for the final group project. So they're getting together as a small groups, three team members, selecting like a local nonprofit or business, and then constructing a marketing plan based on research and then analytics and all these different things. The biggest, I think, flaw in the assignment is they don't have really the time or resources to conduct a lot of primary research, which, as you keep referencing, is very important, whether it's B2C or B2B, surveys, interviews, all these different primary stuff. But I have encouraged them and tried to cover a little bit about secondary research. So are there types of secondary research in B2B specifically? I know in B2C, you know, there's white papers you can read, there's data sets you can buy from research agencies like Forrester, there's, you can do all sorts of different secondary research in B2C. What about B2B? Is there a specific type of data that you guys look at that's not necessarily primary?
Yeah, in our industry, I mean, we definitely Forrester and Gartner. Of course, those are pay to play, as you mentioned, so it's a little bit trickier to get access to that unless you have a very, very expensive subscription. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars a year. Um, Also, I would recommend Digital Commerce 360 and Fit for Commerce. Those are two um, sites that are kind of like they're similar in how they, but they're really commerce focused. They're similar to the Forrester and Gartner reports and stuff like that. But we use those a lot. And I'll touch quickly on, this year for the first time, Intara is bringing its own lead gen in house. We've worked with external partners previously, so as we're learning, we're building our own content marketing machine, is what I keep calling it, and lead gen machine. First, we build the content, then we use the content to build the lead gen machine. We've really relied on Digital Commerce 360, Fit for Commerce, some of these more accessible third-party research sources to help us understand trends within manufacturing, because that's really where we're focused right now. We're also focused in healthcare. We have several healthcare clients, but we've been in that. Well, no, the same kind of research exists. So yeah, I would recommend those as.
Okay. Yeah, I'll link those to the students and they can take a look and see what maybe they'll be able to apply those to their projects. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned you work in healthcare and a bunch of other manufacturing, several other industries, and then just on the website, and I'm sure these are probably not comprehensive. Some of the services you guys offer: insights and strategy, UX design, web development integration, product information management, managed digital services, which is a gamut of different services to offer. So I'm curious, you mentioned like creating content, right? And then the lead gen machine to tell the Intara story. So in addition to working with your clients, right, to market their sort of brand, which I'll get to in just a minute, but for you guys in particular, when you're trying to create and maintain a customer base for Intara, what kinds of content do you guys create? Just to give the first example, I'll let you build on. I noticed that the blog is pretty well populated on your all site, which probably helps a lot with SEO, where you got all kinds of, when somebody searches, like one of the most recent ones, I almost had students read it. I still might. Something about digital transformation, right? About how if you're going to, so blog entries will be one, but what other kinds of content do you use for lead generation?
Yeah, so thank you for noticing. We have a goal this year of publishing one piece of content per week. And so far we've only missed 1 week. And we're doing that deliberately to signal to Google, hey, we're an authority on these topics. We're publishing content at a regular cadence. So we haven't seen a huge lift yet, but we have seen a slight lift. So it's working. I think we just got to keep it up. We're primarily creating blog articles, but we are also creating case studies. So anytime we launch a new project, or even through managed services, for example, have a really significant improvement through SEO or something like that, we try to write up a case study about it, just so we can have that content published. And then we also, our sales team has that as fodder to send to prospects and clients. In addition to that, we are creating videos. We're doing 2 types of video this year. We had a video shoot a couple months, or no, at the beginning of March. Time is so strange in the pandemic. At the beginning of March, we had a video shoot where we had members of our leadership team do interview style videos about different topics, about different products and services that we offer, and different trends that are happening right now. And then we're also doing some motion graphic videos. So again, a couple product videos just to really illustrate more how our services work and what the benefits are. Some of the things we do are really complex. So, video is a great way for us to use, just to add a visual element to really help explain what we're doing. We also write ebooks. So last year we only published 1 ebook, but we have 4 on the docket this year. For example, the next one that we're about to start writing is what to do in your first 90 days as an e-commerce VP. So as you can imagine, e-commerce VP is a job title that's really growing in popularity as more businesses shift to e-com, particularly in the B2B space. So we want to get ahead of that, and we want to create an asset that we think there will be search volume around and that we can run campaigns around. In addition to that, we've tried webinars in the past, especially now. It's really hard to get traction in a webinar, but just because there are so many. But all of the technology partners that we have, the CMS, the PIM, all of the platforms that we implement, we're in partner programs with each of those. And so they each have big events every year. So event marketing is another one that we use. Primarily, we've done that around our partners, but as we move further into focusing and repositioning our company a little bit into, more specific niche areas, we plan to continue with event marketing and also co-writing content or guest blogging into these really specialized trade publications. So from my perspective, content marketing is where it's at. We're generating all the content we can so that we can just be present everywhere that our prospects are looking for content.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty impressive operation that you guys, one per week is very ambitious. I think even at a mid-sized agency, that's quite a bit of content to create. And do you guys distribute it across, like, it's obviously probably not one person, like you maybe assign one person their expertise to create something one week and then another person the next week?
You got it. Historically, we've been really limited in who's writing. That falls a lot to my team. My team is we consist of strong writers. Like that's part of our job description. But we're growing strong writers throughout the company. Our leadership team all is getting actively involved in content generation. And then we're identifying different subject matter experts throughout the organization. And sometimes they're writing, they're just writing on their own. Sometimes we're using a ghostwriter so that they don't really have time. They're doing so much work for the clients that we can just interview them. We can write a draft and just get them off the blank page, and then they can edit it and take it to the finish line. So it's a pretty manual process. Like there's no quick way to do it. It is very manual. It takes a lot of time. It's, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, this is the majority of what I'm doing this year so far. It's just really managing this and making sure that it stays on course, because it is a very aggressive plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And yeah, AI is not quite taken over that's one thing we'll talk about in the coming weeks, about how automation and marketing has taken over a lot of tasks, but a lot of the strategy and stuff and the writing in particular. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be around for hopefully a long time. I mean, that's a great transition, because I want to talk a little bit about other kinds of skills, right? Because a lot of our students, they're very creative in terms of, like, love to create content and they love to shoot video and do photography. And I try to stress to them quite a bit that being a strong writer is always like number one priority. Whatever job you're in, you have to be a strong writer, but especially in media management, if you're creating content, you can't just rely on your creative cloud skills. You have to be able to communicate in the written word. But also too, I sent this over to you before about in the past, when you've talked to some of my classes, you've mentioned like a lot of your work, I don't know if it's still this way, but a lot of your work in the past, and maybe still, is when you're maintaining client relationships, is a lot of the face-to-face presentational skills, interpersonal skills, group work, things that a lot of times creatives who would prefer to sit behind a desk and work may not jump at that as something they love to do. But could you talk a little bit about other, besides writing? I know that's obviously a big one, but other kinds of skills for students who want to get into this kind of work, because it probably doesn't come to their mind immediately, like, oh, I want to, because a lot of it, I mean, I wouldn't call it sales, but a lot of the skills that you're doing, are related, similar, kind of like sales work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say I would include writing in general communication. I would say that's number one. You have to be able to communicate through written format, orally, visually. Like you have to be able to create a PowerPoint deck that really helps supplement and complement what you're saying. Communication is key, and a lot of what we do as marketers is consulting work, and it's active listening. So being able to ask really good questions and then shutting up and actively listening to what they say and not thinking about what you're going to say next. I highly recommend qualitative research as a course, just for this reason, because it really teaches you the importance of just being a listener versus being an active part of the conversation. I love that I got started in journalism, because it taught me how to be a good interviewer, and I've carried that with me throughout. Not everyone can start in journalism, but you can give yourself some exposure to these type of techniques. There's tons and tons of resources around qualitative research and interviewing. Highly, highly recommend any of that. The other kind of soft skill I would mention is empathy. You really have to have empathy for your client, for their boss. So often we're working with what I would call like a manager level directly, but they're reporting up to the C-suite. And then also, of course, their customers, right? You have to have empathy at all levels and really just actively be remembering all of these things at the same time, how to balance your client's goals with their boss's goals, with the company overarching goals, with what the end customer really wants and needs. And then also have some empathy for yourself. Like you're not always going to get it right. Like that, these soft skills are so important because they seem a little squishy, but they're so important in our day-to-day lives. But to get more, I think, to what you're getting at, yes, writing critical and writing to specific personas and writing for all channels, and also editing. You have to be able to edit for yourself. You likely will have to be able to edit for others. That's a big process that we use in my team. You know, I typically edit anything that anyone else writes, but I also write, so I need others to be able to edit for me. Um, and then writing for all those channels. Like it's one thing to write a blog article. It's a different thing to write an ebook. It's a different thing to write a white paper or a social media post or an email campaign with landing pages and CTAs. Like there's so many different levels of things you have to be able to write for, and you have to really understand and be able to learn, you know, track those analytics, understand what performs, what doesn't perform, and be able to adjust and really remember like what works and what doesn't for which audiences, which can often be different. Um, yeah, I guess the other things I would hit on for skill set, knowing the platforms, knowing the MarTech is really important, but it really, like as you mentioned, is just scratching the surface. You have to be able to communicate research. You have to be hungry for information, especially in digital. Our world is evolving at a crazy fast pace. You know, I hesitate to ever use the word expert because what we are experts in today, we won't be experts in a month from now because the tech's evolving so fast. So you have to be really hungry for information. And that's hungry for information about digital, hungry for information about your client, you know, as a company, about their competitors, about their industry, about, I mean, the list goes on and on. So any free time that we have, we're typically spending just researching and trying to trying to keep up with what's next. Um, and then I guess lastly, in my specific role as a marketer for B2B, I would say UX is very important, and it's not necessarily just, well, I would say customer experience. That's a big buzzword right now, but it's something that is so critical, and UX kind of rolls up into that. But really understanding, you might be writing a blog article, but that is one touch point among dozens and dozens that your prospect hopefully will consume before they, you know, make the purchase or whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. So understanding how what you're doing fits into the overall experience that they're having on the other side. I mean, for me, it goes back to empathy and communication, right? It's really keeping in mind you're not writing for yourself, you're not writing for the business, you're writing for that end customer. And if you can keep that in mind and all of those other things kind of gel around that, then you'll be successful.
Clients, right? The businesses that you're working with. Uh, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that a lot of them that you work with are probably, if not resistant, then at least a little bit hesitant about a lot of these things that you guys tell them about digital transformation, because you're like, you need to do this to stay competitive and relevant. And a lot of times, you know, it's like ripping off the Band-Aid because like they've got all these systems in place. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to speak to that directly, but I just have this image in my mind of going to a business and saying, you need to do a complete overhaul. You got to, your product specifications need to be tightened up. And it's like, you know, they're probably saying, why do we need to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is not unique to one industry or one client, or, you know, that is across the board. I think it's just really hard to hear that, hey, you did an okay job, but here's what you really need to do to turn it up to 11, you know? But so we like to say that they're early in their digital transformation journey. And when we say digital transformation, like that's not something that has a beginning and an end. Because digital and tech are evolving so fast, like getting into digital transformation means a long-term commitment, right? It's like, okay, we're going to get in this and we're going to commit to staying ahead of the curve or staying on pace. There is a good blog article that one of our account directors just wrote on, if anyone wants to check that out. It's something like a framework for prioritizing digital investments. He did a great job. His name's Justin. He did a great job of outlining, like when we're speaking to the C-suite, you know, there are so many acronyms and platforms that there's an ERP, there's PLM, PIM, PIN, CMS, CRM. There's so all of these systems that especially manufacturers, but really most enterprise businesses have internally. And a lot of times when we step into the picture, their systems are homegrown. Like either they've completely created them from scratch, or they've taken a really old system and kind of tacked onto it, and they're not efficiently passing data back and forth between them. So we have really smart people that work here, and guys and gals that work here, that just understand how to, I mean, and we do a lot of this through consulting, but, you know, what do you have going on? How do we make it more efficient? How do we make it work smarter, not harder for your business? And then what do we want to layer on top of that or add to it? to help your business, help move your business forward. So yeah, there's a lot to that. And then my team with the UX, that plays a certain part of it, but overall, we're really consulting for digital transformation, trying to help businesses understand the hard truths that they don't often want to hear. And that's why research really helps us sell that story, because it's like, this isn't just our opinion. We're telling you this based on the data that we've collected, and it's statistically significant and it's predictive of the future.
Right. So when you're working with some of these clients, whether they're B2B themselves or B2C, outbound marketing, which you're helping them, create a new website, do you also sometimes advise them and consult them about creating content and lead gen on their end that's not related to the e-commerce systems in place? Is that something that you guys also do?
Sometimes we've really gotten kind of away from it as we start to specialize more. So you hit the nail on the head. We do really complex system builds and integrations, primarily around e-commerce websites and PIM, product information management. And that's anytime you go to like Amazon and you see the product data, like when you see it on a product detail page, all of the details about the product, all the specs, that's coming typically from a PIM. It's being pushed from a PIM to Amazon or to Walmart.com or to the e-commerce website. It's a really efficient way to do that. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into all of that. And as we're becoming more specialized on these really complex implementations and integrations, we've kind of moved away from digital marketing consultation, but we certainly still do. Any client that we have that's on a retainer or managed services is what we call it on the website, is, they kind of get, they sign up for a number of hours each month that we can consult or we can, create based on what their needs are. Often our clients that are more marketing savvy understand how, what we're doing from an infrastructure basis on their website or, with PIM, et cetera, how that relates to digital marketing. And so we often have conversations and consulting sessions around the overarching digital strategy, which includes, marketing, lead gen, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all really interesting. I think for our students too, because it is such a complex business model, I've tried to, in other contexts in the class, say like, if you want to work in this specific industry or this specific sector or this kind of agency, like what is the route to take? And it's never the same for anybody, as you know. All of our roads are different, but I think it is valuable to kind of give them a little bit of a picture about, say, for example, they wanted to work at a place like Antara. They're interested in both, right? So digital transformation and also lead gen in-house in terms of, marketing Antara's brand. So could you give a picture of a few of the types of entry level, and our students are master's students too, but the hard reality is, unfortunately, in this market, even if you have a master, sometimes to get in before, you got to start entry level. So could you talk about maybe some of the entry level or maybe one step above types of positions, and then what is required or what you guys look for in candidates? I know you probably don't have anything right now, but I'm just saying hypothetically down the road.
Absolutely. Antara is unique in that the majority, like the overwhelming majority of the people who work here are developers and business analysts. So we're highly technical. And when I say my team is small but mighty, we're 4 people in a 40-person agency. Now we have account directors and project managers and our technical people. But as far as like my team goes, I basically have 2 positions on my team, 2 types of positions on my team. I have the digital strategist who, this is going to be tricky. We want our digital strategist, which could be for all intents and purposes an entry level position. There may be like a junior digital strategist or something in the future, but the 2 strategists that I have working for me came here with probably about 5 years of relevant experience and advanced degrees. So they both have master's degrees. But what I want to say is digital is becoming more and more focused, specialized. So for example, often clients hire us to be their website agency or their PIM agency, or, they really want us to be focused on something. I mean, just because digital is so vast. However, if you're going to come work at Antara, you do need a general understanding of everything that's related to digital. So in my team with a digital strategist, that would be UX, writing for specific personas across different channels, all the digital marketing, AdWords, email programs, all the social media channels, display, remarketing, all of that. We don't execute on that much for our clients, but we need to be able to speak the language and be able to consult on a strategy for it. I said SEO, SEM, analytics. Every member of my team knows how to read, knows how to go into Google Analytics and find data. We're building custom dashboards for ourselves and our clients to make it a little bit easier for people to see the data. But we also have to be able to get in there and just dig around. And research. You have to be able to, again, that hunger for knowledge is critical, but really confident and comfortable just kind of digging in and figuring it out. Because what we do is changing at such a rapid pace. Like there's no textbook or there's no guide for how to do what we do. You just have to kind of jump in and figure it out. So a knowledge, or at least an understanding of the language, right, and how each of those disciplines work is critical. On the flip side, I have an analyst position. He's actually an SEO specialist and data analyst. His job is a little more specialized. He does all of our SEO strategy consulting with a strategist, with our digital strategists. He also implements Google Analytics on every website or web page that we produce. And then he builds custom dashboards. So he actually just took a data science course and now is learning how to write code, and he's learning more about machine learning and AI. Which, to be honest, is outside of my understanding, but he's very smart and very articulate. So he's a good communicator and can tell me what I need to know to help him succeed. In addition to analytics and SEO, he also manages all of our quantitative research instruments. So he builds our surveys and analyzes that data. So long answer to your question, but it's two really complex positions. And you do need a generalist's understanding, but we typically have a very specialized approach to the work.
Okay, well, thank you, Samara, again, for your time. And it's really been really interesting. I think our students will learn a lot. And I probably will be emailing you for some of those resources. And I may actually have them read that blog post too, because I think that's the one I looked at, the Investing in Digital Transformation. So I'll link that for my students to read.
Great.
Yeah, so we'll be in touch, and thank you so much again.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll talk later.